When functionalists were talking about the different roles for men and women in society, the male instrumental role and the female expressive role, this was based on an understanding that men were in full-time employment and that women were at home full-time. Since the Second World War, we've seen a number of changes in relation to the world of work, and this has affected the roles that people have in the home as well. So one key change has been the increased employment for women, and the type of work available has changed too. So there are more employment opportunities that utilise the kind of soft skills that are often associated with women, caring skills, jobs in teaching, in social work. So with more women working, the question then is, what's happening in the domestic sphere? Does this mean that roles are now shared equally? And in understanding this, we need to look at who does what, how they feel about that, but also who's responsible for what, because people might not be doing things directly, but might be outsourcing certain tasks to others, for example, to paid cleaners. Overall, if we look at time use studies, we can gain a picture that there has been an increase in men's participation in housework over time. That is, men today are generally doing more housework than their own fathers would have done at their stage of life. So they're more likely to be participating in domestic tasks and to be looking after children. However, they are not making an equal contribution compared with their female partners. And in fact, there is an inequality in domestic work even before people have children. Women are doing more in couple households where there are no children present, so they're paying a partnership penalty, and then when they have children, are generally paying a motherhood penalty as well. And that penalty is an increased responsibility for domestic work within the home. This extra responsibility that working women are now facing has been termed the second shift. Arlie Hochschild talked about the way in which when women are in paid work, they are often exploited by men, receiving less pay, for example, than their male counterparts, and then are going home to also face another situation which is often unfair and unequal. So think back to Anne Oakley's study of housework. We understand that getting all these domestic tasks done is often not very enjoyable. It can be quite a lot of drudgery to think about who's going to clean the bathroom, who's going to make the lunch boxes, who's going to cook dinner tonight, and who's going to do the washing up. But nonetheless, without doing these tasks, households cannot run efficiently. So they are very important things to bear in mind and very important things to discuss. Increasing research tells us that often today couples do talk about domestic roles with ideas of egalitarianism. Many men and women nowadays say that they want to share things equally and they each want to take equal roles in the domestic sphere, and many women say they want to work in the paid employment and they enjoy some of the opportunities that gives, opportunities for progression and self-actualisation. And additionally, it's increasingly difficult to actually run a household just on the male breadwinners' wages in these days. So some women are working due to financial necessity and some through choice. But despite men and women saying that they would like an egalitarian role in the home, often things don't work out like that in practice. Tina Miller's study regarding fatherhood is a very good example of this. Tina Miller interviewed 17 fathers as they approached fatherhood for the first time, as they talked about wanting to be actively involved with their children and also with the domestic tasks that are involved in keeping a household running. So they said things like, it's not a man-woman divide anymore, and implied that they're a team working together. But when children arrived, often something different happened. and that men talked about not being able to or not wanting to take on certain tasks. We saw from this study that men had more opportunities to opt out of certain tasks, for example, changing nappies or playing with children, without necessarily being seen as a bad father. So we see complexity here as well as change. Men and women saying they want to move towards equality, but it not always happening on the ground for various reasons. So it seems like traditional ideals regarding breadwinner status and also mums as nurturers, as primary caregivers, are still remaining. Another recent study by Paul Hodkinson and Rachel Brooks has talked about a subgroup of fathers who do take an active or an equal role in relation to their children's lives. So this is a book about sharing care. In this qualitative study, they talk about the way in which the dads were more involved than their previous relatives were, than their own fathers, and the enjoyment and meaning that they did get from that. But they also highlighted some barriers to equal participation. And one of those was in relation to caregiving outside of the home. The fathers reported when taking their children to classes that they felt out of place, sometimes just through the very naming of these classes as mother and baby classes, put them off actually taking those roles, made them kind of question themselves about, were they doing the right thing? Were they going against the grain in going to these activities? The study also highlighted the initial period after childbirth as being quite important for putting routines and structures in place. And it highlighted the way in our society, although we have the possibilities for shared parental leave, it still tends to be the woman who takes off the kind of extended period of maternity leave. And during that period, a lot of routines are set up. And when dads then kind of took over in their shared parenting role, often about 6 months in, then often they were kind of being taught and helped to understand the roles and the routines by their partners. So it almost suggested that the partners had been the primary person to kind of start off the ways in which children would be parented, and they were continuing that. And so despite these dads really wanting to be involved, we see some gender inequalities in relation to childcare. And this was further cemented where these dads were interacting with other institutions such as education, when school teachers might defer to mums, asked to speak to mothers rather than fathers as a kind of routine practice. So this hinted that although we do see change, there may also be barriers for dads who do want to get involved, who do want to take an equal or a primary caregiving responsibility.